Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel. Today, taking a look at some Harvey Kurtzman artwork for EC Comics, specifically the story Corpse on the Imjin, one of his most famous stories, considered by many to be the best that he worked on for EC, for at least for their non-humor titles. I will be showing you the story in this Fantagraphics edition, which is in black and white. I could have sworn that I had a color reprint of this story somewhere. I so vividly remember having it like in my hands and reading it. Like it's just such a familiar story. And yet I searched through my short boxes. I checked all like the special editions that I have, and I could not for the life of me find it anywhere. So we get the black and white one, which is fine with me because we get to really just appreciate Kurtzman's incredible just inking. He has such a unique style to me, just like incredibly heavy-handed on the blacks. The white peeking through is the anomaly sometimes because there's just so much shading, like thick brush shading on not just objects but just characters' faces. Like look at how incredibly stark just all these characters in the foreground are, and then he'll fade them out in the background and just use just line art there. Harvey Kurtzman came to work at EC. He originally went he went in there in 1949 with his portfolio of some humor stuff to Bill Gaines' office, and Bill Gaines loved what he saw, but at the time they were still they had not begun publishing. The EC hadn't become what it would be known for, like the horror or the sci-fi comics. At the time, EC was still in a transitional phase coming out of the educational comics era, which is what EC used to stand for. At the time, they were really just publishing like love and crime comics. But they didn't want to, they didn't want to lose Kurtzman entirely. So they kind of kept in touch with him. And then by the time they did start publishing the heavy hitters like Tales from the Crypt and Vault of Horror, all that, they brought Kurtzman in to do adventure comics for them, like similar to Captain Easy. And so the first couple stories that he did for them for Two-Fisted Tales were more adventure than war, which is what he would go on to be known for, his war comics. So these are more just adventure type stories. Gaines and Al Feldstein didn't feel they had the time to write stories like this. They didn't have the aptitude for it. So Kurtzman had kind of carte blanche to do what he wanted on Two-Fisted Tales. They basically just handed him the title and said, "You're the editor now. You're the writer. You're the artist. Have fun. Go nuts." And he did. But after just a couple issues, the United States got into the Korean War. Like things escalated there, and so war became the topic that people wanted to talk about and read about, and that's where we see the shift here from adventure into the battlefield. Not only did Two-Fisted Tales shift into that, but EC actually added another entire book called Frontline Combat, also edited by Harvey Kurtzman. And Kurtzman's goal with his war comics was not to be anti-war. He viewed war as a necessary evil, but he didn't want to just do what other war comics of the time were doing, which was glorifying it, making, just being super patriotic, just making like the United States soldiers look all completely brave and heroic and stoic and just like perfect and make the war seem noble. He made it. He wanted to show the reality of what the battlefield was like and like the trauma that it causes. And reading through this, I mean, some of it is really shocking. I stop on this page. I love this story. Is maybe not like his best writing, Contact, but some of the art in here is truly sensational. You'll see he does a lot of this. These sequences where the panels are separated only by a brief few moments, Bernie Krigstein gets a lot of credit for like innovating that in his Master Race comic that appeared in Impact in 1955. And that story is that story is great in its own right. It is a truly exceptional story for multiple reasons. But in terms of this type of visual storytelling of just like separating panels, making them a little bit thinner and just going moment by moment, Kurtzman does that constantly. And this is at least 3 years before then. And we'll see other examples of it. But it looks great. So Korean War ramps up, and Kurtzman wants to show the reality of like the trauma of war, and what it's really like for the folks on the battlefield. And that's where we'll skip ahead to Corpse on the Engine, possibly his finest story. Kurtzman was known for being very strict in his layouts. He did things a little bit differently than Gaines and Feldstein did for the horror and sci-fi titles. Since he was the editor and he could control everything, he was very tight with his layouts. And as the series would go on, he wouldn't have the time to ink everything himself. And that's like the second half of this book is the stories that Kurtzman wrote, but others illustrated or inked for him. And what these stories go, that Kurtzman would hand over the pages to these artists and tell them, you are to adhere to my pencils like completely. So artists like John Severin or Bill Elder, even Alex Toth, they would have to put their own styles aside, and they would, not mess with the composition and just recreate exactly what Kurtzman had put down. That led to some strain in relationship. Kurtzman and Alex Toth, for instance, did not really get along. Kurtzman didn't like Toth's work and his inking on his pages. So it's interesting dynamic. In this case, Corpse on the Engine is all Kurtzman, and it opens with a dead body floating down a river. And again, we're immediately on this page, we're seeing that deconstructed storytelling of where moments by moment are just passing panel by panel. We see the body floating, and I like Kurtzman's inking style a lot because, like I said, it's really heavy and just thick, broad black brushstrokes that shouldn't work. Like they would seem amateurish in someone else's hands. Like he'll go outside the lines. You'll see brushstrokes that go beyond, the clothing end or just like the hand, but it works completely. Like it conveys exactly what he's trying to convey. There is a American soldier on the bank of the river watching the body float by, and he's trying to imagine how that body got there. Like, what are the number of ways that he could have been killed? Was it bombers that hit him? Was it rockets from an F-51? Was it 155 mm cannons? Did a rifleman get him? Maybe just a sharpshooter. And he mentions that it could be hand-to-hand combat, but really, you don't tend to actually... He hasn't seen any of that. It's all been long range. Nobody gets close enough for a bayonet anymore. And of course, as he's thinking that, heating up his beans, an enemy combatant comes out of the bushes. An excellent composition. Just like setting the calmness of the scene, him just thinking, watching this body go by, pondering the nature of war and violence, and then boom, we introduce the enemy. You could kind of see why Kurtzman was so strict about his compositions and his layouts. Like he knew what he was doing. A tussle ensues. The enemy combatant jumps for his gun. The gun gets kicked into the river, and there we go. We get into hand-to-hand combat. The thing that never actually happens is happening. And there's a lot of text on this page in the narration, but there are no word bubbles. This is not a superhero fight. He even mentions, where are the wisecracks you read in the comic books? Where are the fancy right hooks you see in the movies? That doesn't exist. That's not what a real fight is like. It's gritty. It's quick. It's messy. It's not choreographed. You pick up what you have. He picks up a broken stick to defend, the enemy picks up a broken stick to defend himself. And they just start whacking at each other and just trying to get the other one to the ground. And the battle, I mean, the fight is, while not choreographed, full of energy. It's kinetic. Like, Kurtzman's style with a lot of looping marks, a lot of looping arcs of ink, add flexibility to the characters, makes them feel like they're always kind of in motion, which is great. I'm just, even looking at the stick that this character is wielding, it's always slightly curved, to denote that it's moving, like it's swinging downward. That's what that slight curve adds to it. And they eventually end up on the ground, and you get one of the most powerful sequences in comics that I've seen. And again, it's that decompressed storytelling, just giving us the moment by moment beat of the American soldier, choking the life and drowning this guy in the river. It's stark. It's bleak. I mean, just the arms, the struggling of the enemy combatant. Like, this one really stands out to me. Like, he's got his fingers hooked into his mouth because he's just desperate, grappling at anything. And of course, we have the panels where we see just him holding him under the water, and the bubbles, are a lot there, a lot less there, and then pretty much gone there. And then that's it. He's killed him. Just look at how much ink is down here. There is no economy of ink. Look how thick these outlines are. He's just laying these things down. And it works. It works so well. And then there's another body floating in the river. And then this is the story of how it got there. And it's incredible. That's the end of the story. Big If's another great one, but I'm not going to go through any more of these. But yeah, that's Corpse on the Imjin. Hell of a story, man. Kurtzman really was brilliant. I wasn't overly familiar with his war stories because war comics are not something that I usually collect. I am much more the horror type. I like the sci-fi stuff. War, I never, I never picked up like Sergeant Rock or Army at War or anything like that. But reading through these Harvey Kurtzman ones, like, I get why he appeals to so many. Like, these are interesting stories. They are thoughtful. They're meaningful. The way that he makes these stories personal, just is unlike any other kind of war comic that I've really encountered before. So I think this is brilliant. Let me know what Harvey Kurtzman war comics you really enjoy. Let me know if there's any other types of comics like this that I should check out. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.